You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney, and we have a show that is pretty packed. It's chock full, stuffed to the brim, and other synonyms I could probably use to describe how much stuff that we actually have going on in this show. We have part 2 of Karl Giberson's interview. Part 1 was amazing. Part 2, we're going to get to this. We're going to get to his whole new series that he's publishing called Jesus at Trump Tower. And so after Karl's interview, we actually have the dramatic radio play version of his first article, Jesus at Trump Tower. But before that, you know what we've got. We've got What's Good, What's Bad. And something else I just wanted to float out there to you. For the last little bit on the show, we've got a surprise. What is that surprise? Well, it wouldn't be a surprise if I went ahead and told you now, so you're going to have to stay tuned to listen to that. So yes, if we're going to go down the checklist, What's Good, What's Bad? Karl Giberson interview part 2, Jesus at Trump Tower dramatic reading, super surprise that I won't tell you about just yet. And so, without further ado, let's hop into this week's What's Good, What's Bad. Here we go. And just a reminder that you can catch everything, every video, every link that I'm mentioning in What's Good, What's Bad over on our website, which you can find it at www.snarkyfaith.com. It's just that easy. It's just that simple. All you got to do is click. And all these things will just pop up for you because they're waiting for you. They're there for you. So here's the first thing in What's Good, What's Bad. Oh my gosh. Do I love Ken Ham. Ken Ham, the ardent supporter of creationism, the creator of the Ark Encounter in Kentucky. He has outdone himself. He has absolutely outdone himself because they're premiering online a new diorama that depicts the wicked population in the pre-flood world. Now, you may say, what's the big deal? Because we tend to love trolling Ken Ham on here because of just the ridiculousness of the Ark Encounter and pretty much just everything about it. So yes, in his search for trying to prove the fact that everything in Genesis is absolutely, literally true, they are now going to have a new part of their exhibit with a diorama that shows dinosaurs fighting gladiators against humans and giants. Now, if this was a joke, if this was a total joke piece, I would be like, man, well done, Ken. But we all know they're not going for jokes here. They're trying to continue to prove their ridiculous ideas and theories. So, what we literally have in this diorama, which you can see on our website, they have giants who are gladiator-style fighting tiny little humans, and at the same time, they're unleashing dinosaurs into the gladiator pit. That's right. I even almost just feel dumber by expressing this, but it's too funny to not miss. So thanks, Ken Ham. Thanks for continuing to pop up into our What's Good, What's Bad of the week. You've truly, truly outdone yourself. Next. You may have missed this in your news cycle, but it is beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. They have a Japanese pool player giving one of the best interviews, one of the most bizarre, hilarious interviews that I've ever seen to the BBC. So you have this BBC reporter, which is Tony Wainwright, and he's interviewing Naoki Oi, who is the defending Chinese Taipei player in pool. And Oi's answer to everything is just hilarious. It's not simply just, I don't even know what you would call this. It's like beyond, like, we've got words around here like Spanglish when you somehow interweave Spanish and English. This is, I don't even know. And, it could quite easily be one of those things that you would say that this is just English folks making fun of this guy and his accent and his lack of being able to fully grasp and hold on to the English language. But oh no, Oi sells it. He sells it up and down. The reporter doesn't even know what to say. It is hilarious. It is something to absolutely behold, and it's beautiful. And I've never really cared to watch the sport of pool. It's fun to play, but this dude makes me want to start tuning in week after week if he's playing. And really just tuning in to figure out what happens afterwards when somebody sticks a microphone in his face. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. Hats off to you, my friend.
My name is Naoki Oi. Today very lucky. Congratulations me! Yay!
All right, so you didn't assume that we would have a week without mentioning our dear Trumpy. But before we get to him, we'll start easy. We'll start easy with his beloved press secretary, Sean Spicer. Now, Sean Spicer has become known for not only his incessant, ridiculous OCD love of chewing gum, what he also has a huge problem with is pronouncing names. Now, I'll tell you first, I would be the first one. I'm not the first one, the last one to be calling out somebody who can't pronounce names. I butcher them constantly on this show. It just somehow doesn't work in my brain. But at the same time, I also know enough that I don't have the skill set to be a press secretary. So therefore, I would not go for the job of press secretary. They have actually set up online it is a word generator on the Sydney Morning Herald. And it's really funny. You simply type in your name, and it spits out what Sean Spicer would call you. For mine, Stuart Deloney is Stubbins Delt. Seems about right? I don't know. But yes, you should try it. It's on the website. Moving on to our dear president. Stephen Colbert ran this small little video snippet on his show last week, and it's just too good not to play here. Just too good. So good. And it's called Self-Reflections with President Trump. And it's Trump talking about the president and how he feels about our current president. Have a listen.
We have a president who is essentially incompetent. Truly, our president doesn't know what he's doing.
He doesn't have a clue, folks. You can't go around just signing little notices that the president signs all the time, executive orders.
Executive order, everything's executive order. Because he doesn't have enough time, because he's playing so much golf. He doesn't have enough time to convince Congress to do it. This guy plays more golf than people on the PGA Tour. We have an incompetent president. We have a president that doesn't know what he's doing.
Oh, Donald, if you could only listen to your own words, the world would be a better place. But speaking of disgusting things like our president, something that you may want to know is that if you are someone who enjoys eating canned greens, which I'm not sure if there's any of you out there that actually enjoys eating canned greens. I don't think I've eaten canned greens since like college. But if you do eat canned greens, there's an article over on the Huffington Post that goes through the FDA defect levels handbook. And what they have, they lay out simply how bad it has to be to where canned greens can't be edible, which is a reassuring fact. Thanks, FDA. But they go on to say this: to be sold in the stores, canned green beans are actually allowed to contain up to 10% of mildew on their leaves. Yummy. Doesn't that sound good? But if we take that same handbook and then apply it to spinach, which is a little different because it's in the mustard green family, mildew's not the worry here, but insect larvae. And so in their handbook, it says this: that you are allowed to have 2 or more 3 millimeter or longer larvae and or larvae fragments or spinach worms, which are basically caterpillars, whose aggregated length exceeds 12 millimeters that are present in 12 pounds of spinach. Isn't that enlightening? Isn't it wonderful? Yeah, it's pretty gross. So lastly, in our What's Good, What's Bad segment, I'll give you something that's actually uplifting and interesting and does not involve anyone talking about larvae or any such thing. So this comes from Kimberly Stover, who blogs at kimberlystover.com. And she wrote this absolutely on point, just hitting the heart of the matter blog post called "If Being a Christian Means XYZ, Then I'm Not a Christian." So the article starts off with using this quote that I've been seeing floating around social media. It's a quote from Billy Graham, where he warned, "I don't want to see religious bigotry in any form. It would disturb me if there was a wedding between the religious fundamentalist and the political right. The hard right has no interest in religion except to manipulate it." Like, just even unpacking that statement coming from Billy Graham is kind of amazing, considering the fact that he fathered Franklin Graham, who continues in his father's footsteps, maybe? No, not really at all. No, Franklin Graham's a douche. But what Kimberly does is she moves forward to this article. Really, it's an article of resistance. And she wrote this poem that I'll read you here today. And she says, if being a Christian means I have to deny health care to another human being, then I'm not a Christian. If being a Christian means I have to deny equality to the LGBT community, then I'm not a Christian. If being a Christian means I have to turn a blind eye to the suffering of refugees, then I am not a Christian. If being a Christian means I have to accept building a wall separating me from another human being so I can be privileged and that they can suffer, then I am not a Christian. And she goes on to say, if being a Christian means I have to deny scientific evidence of climate change, therefore contributing to the destruction of the earth, our home, then I am not a Christian. You can find the entire article over on her website, kimberlystover.com. The poem that she wrote is beautiful, and that was just a tiny snippet of it. But I thought this was a good staging point for us to hop off of and then go into our talk with Karl Giberson. If you caught last week's episode, which was part 1 of the Karl Giberson interview. Now, Karl is a professor of science and religion at Stonehill College. He has written many pieces for the Huffington Post, and on top of that, he is a proponent of evolution, but also holds, in his other hand, the fact that he's a Christian and how those two things can get along. We talked about what it means to be a thinking Christian, because oftentimes it feels like those things don't exist in the real world. Sounds like an oxymoron sometimes, and it absolutely shouldn't. And so we have part 2 of Karl's interview here today, talking about science, critical thought, and then eventually we'll use that interview to dovetail into our dramatic reading of his article, of his first article in a series of posts that he has at the Huffington Post called Jesus at Trump Tower. So here is the second part of our interview with Karl. Enjoy. Well, and we had mentioned earlier, just in this whole conversation that we're having here about that whole divide between science and religion. Why do you think that, in the same realm, why why religion and politics have been easy bedfellows, and you see like science and religion being very just against one another? So why do you think that somehow politics and faith have been integrated way more than they probably should be?
Well, Randall Balmer, a friend of mine that teaches at Dartmouth College, he's done a very interesting analysis of the relationship between the evangelical church and abortion. And most evangelicals think that being anti-abortion is kind of the traditional Christian position that goes, all the way back to, the Garden of Eden. But in fact, and this is Randall Balmer's work, not mine, but if you look at the response of evangelicals, even people like Jerry Falwell and so on, in the immediate aftermath of Roe v. Wade, there wasn't this consistent message that we need to oppose abortion at all costs, and Balmer kind of traces this, and he shows that what we think of as the religious right was kind of originally organized around opposition to civil rights. I mean, it was a Southern racist movement, and Jerry Falwell Sr. spent the latter part of his career trying to kind of buy up all the books that he'd written when he was younger that were opposed to the integration of the schools. And many of the Christian schools that got started in the South were started to avoid white evangelicals needing to have black classmates. So there was a lot of political power in the civil rights movement, and this power created the opposition of the religious right. But then they lost, right? The civil rights movement won basically all of the battles, at least legally. And then the movement, this is Balmer's insight here, the movement kind of had political power, but nowhere to use it. And so they said, well, we've lost the battle for civil rights. We need something to animate our followers so we can keep this unity, this big, powerful voice that we have alive. And so they picked up abortion. And so they made a political decision to try and convince evangelicals all over America that abortion was the great question of our time, and that Christians needed to rally against that. And this then was exploited by the Republican Party. And so the Republican Party basically suckered this large evangelical demographic into thinking that because we're anti-abortion, we are your party. And so gradually over the last few decades, the GOP platform, the Ten Commandments, and the Bible all became blended together in this big mishmash of stuff, and that's what evangelicalism is today.
Well, if you took that from an evolutionary standpoint, probably DNA-wise, all those things shouldn't be combined and create anything, right? Is that how it?
That's how you get a monster, right?
Yes.
Random genes from disparate species, and you put them together, and you say, let's see what comes out. And what comes out of that, is now sitting in the White House as the President of the United States.
Yes. And so speaking about our beloved McDonald's president that is in the White House, you wrote this piece, which is what initially led me to finding you, called Jesus at Trump Tower. And I think it is a beautiful satire that also just has undercurrents of truth that hopefully folks should be able to read and be able to just begin to question more about what's going on, especially with a candidate that was endorsed by so many evangelicals out there. Talking about this piece, what led you to write this article?
Well, I mean, the concern that developed for me as I kind of watched the political scene over the last year was a kind of astonishment at how enthusiastic many of my own lifelong friends who were conservative evangelicals, how much enthusiasm they had for Donald Trump. And I just found that mystifying. And then as he won the nomination, they became even more enthusiastic, and they seemed to somehow feel like these little small things that Hillary Clinton had done, like use a private server, like that was a gigantic moral failure. But Donald Trump's history with women was just something to be overlooked as kind of locker room expectations and so on. And so I began to kind of become really discouraged about the kind of the moral insight of this community that I had once been a part of, and that had done a lot to kind of shape my understanding of the world. And so I, out of my dismay at this, and I had many Facebook dialogues about how the Republican Party and Donald Trump in particular were about as far away from the teachings of Jesus as one could possibly imagine. I mean, if you just theoretically tried to invent an anti-Jesus party, you'd get the GOP led by Donald Trump and Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and so on. So my specific impetus to write this piece came when I became convinced that Trump as president was actually worse, not better, than Trump as candidate. Like, I tend to be an optimist, and so I held out hope that some of the worst characteristics of him as a public figure might kind of retreat, and he might become more of a statesman when he moved in as president, and perhaps we could get behind him, and maybe in some mysterious way he would be a much better president than he was candidate. But it quickly became clear that he was a worse president than he was candidate, and that the more power that he has, the worse he gets. And I thought, the right thing to do in a situation like this, and by right, I mean, like, if one takes morality seriously, and if you have a public voice, you should use it, that we need to oppose Trump. Trump, we need to make reasonable efforts to make sure that Trump's failings as a leader and as a human being are sort of spotlighted with enough regularity that people will slowly become fed up with them. And so I thought, well, like, if I satirize Trump talking to Jesus to try to make it clear to any thoughtful evangelical who might read that really Jesus and Trump have no overlap whatsoever, and so I can't, as a Christian, continue to support Trump, that this actually would be a contribution that I could feel good about. Plus, it's kind of fun to do that. But it means that, like you said, the piece doesn't just kind of. It's more than sort of Alec Baldwin just making fun and you just laugh at the end of his little diatribe. There's no real point that you've taken home. But I kind of wanted it to be a sort of, if you will, kind of highbrow, more sort of theologically informed takedown of Trump.
Well, I thought you did that very well. For those of you that were looking for this, you can look up Jesus at Trump Tower, and it's featured on the Huffington Post right now. Before we finish this interview, I like to usually end these interviews with a ridiculous question. And so, Karl, I wanted you to be able to take this. As I was kind of looking into your background, I did find out that you're a little bit of a Trekkie. Is that correct?
I did watch, The
Next Generation.
Yeah, I watched Star Trek: Next Generation. It's the glories of binge viewing. Like, I watched them in consecutive order from one to the end, and and I just thought, this is marvelous.
And okay, so it's easy to see how the Next Generation could inform and kind of just inform some of your desires and your love of science. But how would you say the Next Generation informed issues of faith for you?
Well, I probably don't have a constructive answer, but I do have. There was a sense in which there was a faith connection that Star Trek, with its interesting vision of kind of traveling from one intergalactic civilization to the next and meeting all kinds of different people, it does, I think, remind you that if the universe is indeed like that, we need to kind of wrestle with the parochialisms of our earthly religions. And there's been a fair amount of discussion. Some people have even written entire books on like what is the relationship between Christianity and life on other planets and so on. And I remember back in college when, Larry Norman, who was kind of the first big Christian rock star, who was, kind of controversial because of, he was kind of making regular rock music acceptable. And, he talked about life on other planets. He had this great line from a song where he said, if there's life, he's talking about Jesus. He said, if there's life on other planets, then I'm sure that he must know. And he's been there once already and has died to save their souls. So like the notion that Jesus has hopped from planet to planet to planet and died in some way to save them all from sin just seems so implausible to me that it really forces, I think, a certain humility on somebody taking the earthly situation seriously, that we may not be able to simply kind of generalize our religion in some universal sense. And so that's the kind of thing that has drawn me more and more to kind of think that really Christianity ought to be about trying to dig really deeply into the things that Jesus taught and to kind of figure out how one would translate those into a modern world where we have a tax system and an internet and a global economy and so on. And so we should be thinking more about like who is our neighbor, like I tried to do in my piece.
Well, Karl, thank you so much for your time. If anyone is wanting to find out more information about Karl Giberson, you can find his books on Amazon: Saving Darwin, Saving the Original Sinner, Language of Science and Faith, amongst many, many, many others. You can also find his blogging at the Huffington Post. Karl, thank you so much for your time, and I just really appreciate you joining us for the show and tolerating me long enough to make it through this hour together. So thank you so much.
Sure. It was fun talking with you.
Well, that is it for our talk with Karl Giberson. I just want to again say muchas gracias, Karl. Thank you so much. Karl was a wonderfully gracious person to be on the show. We chatted a bunch before the interview. We chatted a bunch after the interview. He's just an all-around solid dude who is also pretty smart to boot. So moving on, this is the thing that we've been building up for the last 2 weeks. It's finally here. Yes, we have the dramatic reading of Karl's first work is in a series that he did called Jesus in Trump Tower. Here is Jesus in Trump Tower. Enjoy.
One day, Jesus visited Donald Trump at Trump Tower. He had been invited because Donald wanted to ask him a question, and Jesus was curious. Trump usually answers questions since he has such a high IQ, and even has an uncle who was so smart that he taught engineering at MIT for 50 years.
You know, Jesus, I'm smart. Really smart. Probably the smartest person who was ever president. It's in my genes. I have great genes. But I want to tell you something big. I don't know everything, okay? I know you might not believe that, but it's true.
I believe you. In fact, I've known that for some time.
And you are smart too, I hear. Maybe as smart as me, who can say? But you're the son of God and all, so I want to ask you a question.
What would you like to know?
I'm interested in eternal life, in heaven, okay? Now, I'm not worried that I won't go to heaven, of course. In fact, if you come to Trump Tower, you will see I practically live there now. And my latest wife is an angel, if you know what I mean. And we know angels don't grow old, just like my wife doesn't grow old, because I keep replacing her with a younger one, okay?
Jesus stared at Trump, struggling to maintain his divine composure.
So my question is this, Jesus. Let's suppose I wasn't 100% certain about going to heaven. What must I do to be totally sure that I will? Inherit eternal life, as they say.
Have you read the Bible?
Oh, totally. Look, nobody has ever read it quite like me. I am the ultimate Bible reader, okay?
Okay. Well, what does it say about how you should live?
You mean in 2 Corinthians?
No. In the law. In the Old Testament.
Oh, I see. My Bible is brand new, latest edition. I don't read old stuff, only new Bible stuff, like 2 Corinthians.
Jesus responded patiently.
In the part of the Bible called the law, it says you should love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind.
Trump combed his hair and formed his mouth into a perfect circle, as though he was going to say something, but Jesus interrupted.
Do you do that?
Big league, okay? Nobody loves the Lord more than Donald Trump, believe me.
Well, good.
So I'm all set. I have this eternal life thing in the bag. Bigly, I knew it.
Not so fast. There's one more thing you have to do. You must love your neighbor as yourself.
Love my neighbor as myself? As myself? Come on, Jesus. You are pulling my leg, right? I mean, I have some great neighbors, but they're not as great as me, okay? They don't have as much money. Their wives aren't supermodels. They've never had a reality TV show. And nothing in their apartments is plated with actual gold, okay? Some are losers. How can I possibly love them like I love myself?
Jesus began to respond, but Trump interrupted.
I just thought of something. I bet my neighbors actually love me more than they love themselves, okay? And why wouldn't they? So I make it easy for my neighbors to follow this rule about loving your neighbor as yourself.
Once again, Jesus tried to respond, but Trump interrupted.
I do have some great neighbors, though. Great neighbors. Every one of them is a millionaire. Every one. And some are billionaires, but not so rich as me.
Donald, these are not your neighbors.
Yes, they are. They live in the same building. They are my neighbors.
No, that's not what the Bible means when it speaks of our neighbors.
Well then, who is my neighbor according to the Bible? Not those foreigners who work at Gucci's on the first floor, I hope.
Let me explain this by way of a story.
Trump looked at his watch.
Okay, but I hope it's not a long story. I feel a tweet coming on.
Jesus got up and walked to the window and began to speak.
A man was traveling from San Diego to Los Angeles when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him, and went away, leaving him half naked and bleeding to death on the edge of a deserted beach. The pastor of San Diego's largest megachurch happened to be walking along the same beach, and when he saw the man, he made a wide berth and passed by at some distance. In a similar fashion, the mayor of a local town, when he came to the place and saw the unconscious man, passed at some distance. But an undocumented migrant worker, as he walked along the beach, heading to the farm where he picked watermelon for $36 a day, he came across the injured man and took pity on him. He went to him and saw that he was bleeding from knife wounds. So he poured clean water from the bottle in his lunchbox into the man's wounds to clean them. And then he took off his shirt and ripped it into strips to make bandages to stop the bleeding. And he waited. He waited with the man, cradling his head in his lap. And after a time, the injured man regained consciousness, and the migrant worker helped him stand and supported him as they walked together to a nearby building which housed a small shop that rented beach towels. Although he had very little money, the migrant worker gave the owner of the shop $50 in exchange for letting the injured man rest in his facility and use some of the towels for bandages. He also borrowed the shopkeeper's phone and called 911. And as he headed off to the watermelon farm, the migrant worker was happy to see an ambulance pulling up in front of the shop.
Jesus paused and kicked Trump in the shin.
Pay attention, Donald.
Sorry, Jesus, but this is such a long story.
I need to ask you something important about the story I just told you. Which of the three people who encountered the injured man was a neighbor to him?
I have no idea. I don't know where any of these people lived. Probably none of them were neighbors.
But you see, Donald, in the kingdom of God, our neighbors are not just the people who live next door or in the same high-rise building. Our neighbors are the people who come into our lives who need our help. And the injured man on the beach needed help.
Was he vetted?
Vetted?
Yes, vetted. Was he a terrorist, a rapist, a murderer? Was he an American citizen? The pastor and the politician were right to give him a wide berth until he was vetted. You don't put yourself at risk helping people who are not vetted.
How long does vetting take?
Doesn't matter. You take whatever time you need.
But the man was bleeding to death.
Doesn't matter. You vet people before you help them, okay? And if they die, too bad. They should have been more careful. Look, this migrant worker was probably not even an American citizen, okay? And he took this unvetted guy who could have been a terrorist or a murderer and left him with a shopkeeper. Not very neighborly, if you ask me. I certainly wouldn't have brought that injured guy to Trump Tower, believe me.
In the kingdom of God, we help those in need, even when it is uncertain or even dangerous. That is what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. If you were bleeding to death on the beach, you would want help. Would you want a neighbor to help you, even if they did not know who you were? You asked about eternal life, Donald. You must love those in need, all of them, in every part of the planet, in every religion, as you love yourself. Then you will inherit eternal life.
Jesus noticed that Trump was typing something into his phone.
At real Donald Trump, Jesus has crazy ideas about neighbors. Overrated as a thinker, even if he is the Son of God. Sad.
Well, this is the moment that we've been waiting for the whole show. I teased it, and you're wanting to know who our special guest is. And it's none other than illustrious Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben is back after your extended paternity leave.
Illustrious makes me sound like have conditioner in my hair.
Oh, if they could see the video I see, there's a lot of conditioner. Maybe some hot oils.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I used conditioner.
Okay, so much has happened, Ben, since we've had you hang on the show. And really, I guess the way I'm making it sound like I haven't even talked to you either since then, but I have.
Yeah. I just fell off the map, fell off the grid, like most people do when they have children.
You were essentially just were in a coma, and we were about to pull the plug, and miraculously, you started breathing on your own again.
You're about to $1 million baby me.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm more like a $10 baby.
All right, so much has happened. So we have not talked to you since the inauguration. We have not talked to you since Baby Deacon dropped onto this earth and made a crater impact and has been changing. It is. He's been changing your guys' life. So first of all, how is it being a dad right now? Where are you at dad-wise?
I'm feeling a little more like a dad, I guess. It's interesting how people, I think, have this kind of like mythos around children, and I don't know if I'm sure it's different for everyone, but it's very difficult. Actually, a lot of the things that people kind of joke about or hinted at, like not being able to sleep, that's new. I don't have any. I need some wood to knock on, but that's been good. He sleeps like a champ. I mean, he's actually a pretty easy kiddo, but yeah, there's been for both of us, there's just sort of a long learning process of, sort of recognizing that we're parents, and it's just been, I don't know. It's not like you have a kid and then all of a sudden like magic happens and you feel like a parent,
Yeah, usually it's magic happens, then you have the kid.
Yeah, pretty much. The magic, and then the magic's over. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but what so much of this feels like, because again, my oldest is about to turn 15, and we're still learning. We're still figuring this out. We still don't really have a clue, and we're kind of just doing the fake it till you make it, or until they leave for college.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much just life in general. Just fake it till you make it.
So we're gonna have to get Little Deacon on the show at some point.
Okay.
We'll have to get him to at least cry into a microphone.
He might. He might show up on this show. Depending on whether he goes down to nap or not.
Okay, but I know. The weather's pretty warm today. Are we going to have naked babies? Because this isn't that kind of program.
No, we were out playing with compost earlier, so I think he's pretty wiped out right now.
Compost and wiped out. There's like so many. Okay, compost, so chicken. on all of that, do you have any good dad jokes now that you're a dad?
Myself. Dad, that's a pretty good joke.
Well, considering you haven't been on the show since we went from Orange Messiah as a candidate to now Orange Messiah as a wrecking ball in the White House. What have been some of your unique observations you've had since all this craziness has happened? Orange in the White House.
Yeah, I was actually thinking this morning, we joked months and gosh, maybe even a year ago about feeling endangered by, we're like, oh, Trump's listening to this. He's going to have a hit out for us. And now it's becoming more like that could actually happen at some point, right? He's kind of removing people from jobs, and people are sort of like dropping off the map in some places that have criticized him, and like companies are closing. And he really kind of goes after people with a vengeance when they come at him. But
very Putin-esque.
Yeah, his buddy Putin. He's learned a lot from him. But I guess in terms of insight, I just think and we've talked about this before, but I think I get a little frustrated because I feel like people are so distractible, and maybe I'm too idealistic, or I simplify things too much, but I feel like there are general problems on the table in our country, and we tend to I'm not saying that there aren't still problems right now that we're trying to deal with and sort of raising awareness for in the country, but we tend to, on the one hand, we go from one problem to the next so quickly. I feel like Trump just kind of puts all these problems out there, and our messages get watered down and confused and muddled, and it's very kind of attention deficit right now in politics. But also, I feel like, for me at least, I just get tired. I'm like tired of hearing about it. I'm exhausted from from Trump, he just everywhere, but also from anti-Trump. I'm just, and I'm not saying I agree really with anything that he says or does, but I just am like tired of him. He's exhausting. Like all of this is just exhausting.
Yeah, like that's one of my biggest worries, is that we're going to eventually just hit a point where this crazy that we're living in becomes normal, and then we become numb to that.
Yeah,
because you can only be shocked so many times. Before it just tends to kind of you start to shrug it off. I feel like we're living in the middle of a Saw film. And, after a while, you just kind of become numb to the violence. You become numb to like just what awful things are happening.
Yeah, this could be potentially a dividing analogy, and it could be way off the mark. But I tend to, after having watched basketball for 20 something years now, have picked up that over at Duke has this strategy with his team that they tend to foul a lot throughout the game because, I mean, the referees can only call so many of them. They're not going to call if you foul 10 times in a minute. I mean, they're going to get exhausted. Well, for one, they probably don't see all 10 of them, but also they're not going to call that many fouls. So you're going to get away with a lot more. And over time, used to seeing that, and it's cognitively difficult for them to pick out, and of course they're still calling fouls, but it's just sort of this trick of, tricking their brains into not seeing that you're fouling the entire game. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's similar with Trump. There's just so much. There's so much stupidity that and spin and and I think that's what really is coming up in satire and comedy now, that he just spins things so quickly. Fake news and I didn't say that, and people laugh, but it's scary. I mean, it's very much 1984 that there is a lot of sort of truth and untruth going on at the same time, and people just get confused or tired. I don't know which one. And so, and you think sort of the older generation who don't have access or don't care to watch, news shows or satire are not really going to pick up on that there's so much false information, and they're just going to, believe, take him, whatever he's saying at face value. So I don't know. I just, I guess from a philosophy background, I tend to not really bite at the sexy stuff. I really want to dig into like what's actually sort of on the table, what's actually going on, maybe like pull the curtain a little bit. And I think it's so easy right now to just kind of bite into that, whatever Trump is saying at the moment, and let's fight that, rather than, we were getting so close to with things like, Occupy Wall Street and really raising awareness of how, people like haves and have-nots. And I felt like we were getting really close, especially with Bernie Sanders sort of being a mouthpiece for a lot of inequality. And I feel like that is kind of at the heart of a lot of our problems. And that is just, it feels like 40 years ago now. I mean, that feels like so distant from where we're at. And it really frustrates me.
Well, tell me this, as we start wrapping up this show, what is one thing that gives you hope right now?
I am excited to see. I want to be careful in how I put this, because I am a Christian. I'm nonviolent. I don't advocate for violence, but I am seeing seeds of revolution, I think, or at least revolutionary thought, or, excitement in voices that feel that they can and sort of act against fascism and against bullying. And I don't know, it was almost like there was so much kind of marginal stuff, like celebration of margins going on, that we kind of lost that need to act. And we were just sort of reveling in the idea of identity and things like that. And now I think people are becoming more sort of active and saying, oh my gosh, in 4 years, where are we going to be? We need to do something. So that's kind of exciting.
Well, that is definitely a good word. And as we start moving to the end, as we have arrived at the end of the broadcast this week, just a reminder that you can catch this show and past shows on www.snarkyfaith.com. And if you go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, where we just send you one email a week with all the content that we are putting out over on the website. If you join us, if you join our little Snarky tribe on there with the newsletter, what we're going to start doing is what we were testing out here today for this part of the show, was that we're going to start opening up to kind of that private group, that group of subscribers, where we'll start doing like a show once a month that we will open it up. We'll have a part where Ben and I talk like we like to talk back and forth, but then we'll open it up for Q&A and let you guys be able to share questions and ideas and pushbacks and critiques and all that kind of good stuff. But if you want to hop on board with that, go to www.snarkyfaith.com and you can catch all of that. Also, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to have you a part of this little tribe that we've got going here. That's all I've got this week, and we will catch you again next week.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Aqueduct Conference Centre was established in 1978 as a peaceful destination for small group meetings, special events, conferences, retreats, and weddings. For more information, go to www.aqueductcc.com. We are also sponsored by Lumen. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be better than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.